Welcome to Nocturnal Nightmares TV, where the sea holds more than just waves. Tonight, we dive into 8 bone-chilling tales of terror from the deep. From ghost ships to ancient creatures lurking beneath the surface, these stories will make you think twice about the next time you set sail. Hold on tight, because when you're lost at sea, you're never really alone. The island that wasn't there. We had been drifting for days with no land in sight, and our food and water supplies were running low. Morale was dropping fast, and every wave felt like it was mocking us, pushing us further away from any hope of rescue. Then we saw it, a small island in the distance. It was like a mirage at first, but the closer we got, the more real it became. We could see trees, a sandy beach, and even birds circling in the sky. We steered the boat toward it with renewed energy, eager to set foot on solid ground. When we reached the shore, everything seemed normal at first. The sand was warm underfoot, the palm trees swayed gently in the breeze, and there was a freshwater stream. It felt like paradise. But as night fell, things changed. The island grew unnaturally quiet. The birds that had been chirping all day were suddenly silent. The wind stopped, and the air grew thick with a strange tension. Then came the whispers. We couldn't see anyone, but we heard voices all around us, coming from the trees, the water, and the very ground we stood on. They were angry and accusing. We didn't belong here, they said. This wasn't a place for the living. We tried to leave, but the boat wouldn't move. No matter how hard we paddled, the island held us in place. It wasn't until the next morning, when the sun rose, that we found ourselves back in open water. The island was gone, vanished like it had never existed, but we'll never forget the voices. The phantom light. We had been lost at sea for 3 days, our compass broken, and no landmarks to guide us. Every direction looked the same, just endless waves and an empty horizon. Hope was running out fast. That night, as we sat in silence, we saw a light in the distance. It was small at first, flickering like a lighthouse or a distant ship. We felt a surge of hope. Maybe we weren't as lost as we thought. We steered toward it, watching the light grow brighter. But something was off. The light didn't stay in one place. It moved, darting from side to side, too fast for any ship or lighthouse. It almost seemed alive. Still, we pressed on, desperate for any sign of help. As we got closer, the light grew more erratic, flickering wildly. Then, without warning, it vanished. The sea was plunged into darkness, and we were left floating, disoriented and confused. Suddenly, the light reappeared, right next to our boat. It was no longer a beacon of hope. It was a glowing, ghostly figure, standing silently on the water, its eyes glowing like fire. It didn't move, didn't speak, just stared at us with an intensity that chilled us to the bone. We backed away slowly, turning the boat in the opposite direction, praying we could outrun it. When we finally looked back, the light was gone, and we were alone in the dark once more. We never spoke of that night again, but every now and then, I see a flicker of light on the horizon, and I wonder if it's still out there, waiting for its next victim. The sirens call. The sun was setting when we realized we were lost. The ocean was vast, and we had sailed too far from shore. The GPS wasn't working, and the radio only spat static. There was nothing but endless water and the growing dark around us. As night fell, we heard it, a voice. Soft at first, like someone singing far off in the distance. It was beautiful, hauntingly so. My crewmates were mesmerized, their eyes fixed on the horizon. "Do you hear that?" one of them asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I did. But there was something wrong with it, something that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. "Don't listen," I warned, but it was too late. The others were already leaning over the edge of the boat, trying to catch a glimpse of whatever was out there. The voice grew louder, more insistent, beckoning us closer. Suddenly, something breached the surface. A figure, shimmering in the moonlight. It was a woman. Or at least, it looked like one. But her eyes were too wide, her smile too sharp, her teeth like rows of needles. She sang louder, her voice pulling the others into a trance. Before I could stop them, 2 of my crewmates jumped into the water, swimming toward her. The water churned, and within seconds, they were gone. Pulled beneath the waves, their cries were swallowed by the dark. I grabbed the wheel, praying for the wind to take us far from that place. The last thing I heard was her voice, still calling, still beautiful, but I never looked back. The endless fog, We had been drifting in a thick fog for what felt like days. The sun hadn't broken through once, and the sea was eerily calm. It was as if we were trapped in a world without time, with nothing but the sound of our boat cutting through the water. Then we heard it, an engine, a faint hum, barely discernible through the fog. Relief washed over us. Another boat, maybe a rescue. We called out, but there was no reply. Just the hum, growing louder, closer. We tried to follow the sound, steering our boat toward it, but no matter how far we went, we never seemed to reach it. The fog grew thicker, wrapping around us like a shroud. And the humming, it was all around us now, vibrating in the very air, but still, no boat appeared. That's when the first voice broke through the fog. It was low, almost a whisper. "Turn back," it said. But there was nowhere to turn back to. Then another voice, this one closer, louder. "You're not alone." We searched the boat frantic, but there was no one else aboard, just us. The fog pressed closer, suffocating. The humming grew into a roar, and the voices, there were dozens of them now, surrounding us, filling our ears with warnings, threats, and pleas. And through it all, we never saw a single soul. We abandoned the boat that night, taking the lifeboat and rowing blindly into the unknown. When the fog finally cleared, our boat was gone, lost forever in the mist. The vanishing crew. We were on a fishing trip, just the three of us, when we got caught in a storm. It rolled in out of nowhere, the sky going from bright blue to a menacing gray in minutes. The waves picked up, tossing our small boat like a toy. We fought to keep it upright, shouting orders and gripping the wheel as the storm raged around us. Then, as quickly as it began, the storm stopped. The sea calmed, the sky cleared, and we found ourselves in an eerie, dead silence. No wind, no waves, just the sound of our boat creaking as it floated in place. We looked around, confused but relieved, until we noticed something strange. The other boats were gone. Earlier, we'd seen at least 5 or 6 fishing boats around us, all struggling through the storm, but now, nothing. Just empty water as far as the eye could see. We tried the radio. Static. We shouted, hoping someone would hear us. No response. It was as if we were the only ones left in the world. That night, as we drifted into the open sea, we heard voices. At first, we thought it was the radio coming back to life, but it wasn't that. The voices were distant, faint, like they were calling from the water itself. They were pleading, crying for help. We shone flashlights over the side, but there was nothing, just dark water. One by one, my crew started to panic. The voices grew louder, and in the dead of night, one of my crewmates disappeared. No splash, no scream, just gone. The next morning, the second man vanished the same way. I was alone. By the time I was rescued, I was delirious, babbling about voices in the water. They never found the other boats or the men. But I know what I heard. I know they're still out there, somewhere in the deep. The creature beneath. We were deep in the Pacific, miles from land, on a research expedition when we noticed something strange. The water beneath us was darker than usual, almost black. At first, we thought it was a trick of the light, maybe a deep current stirring up the silt from the ocean floor. But then the boat shook. Just a small tremor at first, like something large had brushed up against it. We dismissed it as a passing whale or maybe a school of fish. But the shaking didn't stop. It grew stronger, more violent. Suddenly, the boat was lifted out of the water. Just for a moment, but long enough to send us all tumbling to the deck. We scrambled to the edge, peering over the side, and that's when we saw it. A massive shadow beneath the water, so large it dwarfed our boat. It was moving slowly, deliberately, circling us. We couldn't make out any features, just the sheer size of it. Whatever it was ancient and powerful. The next few hours were a blur of panic. The creature continued to circle us, nudging the boat and testing it. We couldn't escape. Every time we tried to move, it would block our path, its massive form rising just beneath the surface. Then, as suddenly as it had appeared, it was gone. The water calmed, and the shadow vanished into the deep. We never saw it again, but I know it's still out there. Waiting, the deep one. We were deep-sea fishing far off the coast, just the three of us. The ocean was calm, the fish biting, and it seemed like the perfect day. Until we saw the ripple in the water. It was subtle at first, like something large was moving beneath the surface. We joked about it being a whale or some giant fish, but the ripples kept growing, spreading out in all directions. Something was coming. Suddenly, the boat lurched, as if it had hit something, but the water was clear. Then we felt it, a pressure beneath us, something pushing up from the depths. The boat groaned as if it were being lifted, but there was no land, no rocks, just the endless ocean. We leaned over the side, and that's when we saw it, a shape, massive and dark, rising from the deep. It wasn't a fish or a whale or anything that should exist in the sea. Its skin was slick and shiny, its eyes enormous, unblinking. It stared at us from below, and for a moment, time stood still. Then, without warning, it slammed into the boat. We were thrown into the water, the cold hitting us like a slap. I surfaced, gasping, just in time to see the creature rise higher. It let out a low, guttural sound, like the ocean itself was groaning. We swam for our lives, barely reaching the wreckage of our boat. Whatever that thing was, it vanished back into the depths. But we knew it was still down there, waiting. We were rescued the next day, but no one believed us. They said it was a rogue wave, a freak accident, but we know what we saw, and I pray we never see it again. The ghost ship. We were lost at sea for days. The sky was overcast, the sun just a distant memory, and the water stretched out endlessly in all directions. Our boat had no power left, and we were drifting, hoping to spot some land or a passing ship. But what we found, well, we never could have imagined it. Late one evening, with nothing but the sound of waves slapping the hull, we saw a shadowy outline on the horizon. A ship. At first it was a welcome sight. We waved, shouted, and did everything to signal them. As we got closer, something was off. The ship was old, much older than any vessel we had seen. Its sails were tattered, the wood worn and creaking, like it had been abandoned long ago. We pulled alongside it, desperate for help. But there was no crew, no sign of life at all, just the eerie creak of old ropes in the wind. Against better judgment, we climbed aboard. That's when the whispering began. Low, haunting murmurs, barely audible, as if the ship itself was speaking. The air turned cold, colder than the open ocean should ever be. Then we heard footsteps, slow, deliberate footsteps, coming from the captain's quarters. We held our breath, not daring to move. The door creaked open, and standing there in the dim light was a man, or what used to be a man. His face was pale, his eyes hollow, his clothes from a time long forgotten. He smiled, but it wasn't a friendly smile. It was the kind of smile that chilled you to your bones. We ran, scrambling back to our boat, and paddled away as fast as we could. When we looked back, the ship was gone, vanished, as if it had never been there at all.